One thing you used to say to me a lot when we were to have our side conversations when we were filming the Houston series back in 2019, we talk about ways to fix our sport, right? And we would talk about, oh, like IWF should do this or they shouldn't do that. And one thing you kept on harping back on was that we have too many professional athletes, and because of that, it's harder to maintain a structured professional sport when everyone calls himself a pro. Can you
Right.
kind of elaborate on that? Of what do you mean by that?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think the biggest problem we have at the professional level, obviously, is the federation system. We're not a professional sport because we're run as an amateur system. But in terms of the athletes, we just have too many in the sport. And so when you graduate, there is no finite number like NBA or NFL or whatever. They have finite numbers of how many can be on the team. So you're limited. But we just have people all over the world that continue to run. And what it does, it pulls resources from the people that actually need to be there. My idea is to create a world league in terms of not necessarily events, but just a league of certain amount of people, and then you have like a B league, and a B league is something at a certain level. Let's say you pick 32 or so, and they're in the A league, and that's it. And you have to fight your way in. And just like we have in soccer, in a lot of cases, the bottom people drop out. If there's an injury, they could be replaced. They're moved up. Just like you have the 10-day contracts, you can move up and in, and maybe they come back and you're back down because we need to have competition to be at the top level of our sport. And the way that would help is it's easier to get lanes for meets. The meets can focus on less people. We'll end up having less agents because there are way too many agents in the business. And then the ones that are the second level, we can focus more development money on them. Like right now, they're giving everyone development money. Well, if you set this league, well, that development money can shift to those levels, and then the top level with less competition in terms of people, they can make more, so they don't need that. So their job is to build the professional side of the sport, and then the second level, because we hear about, oh, you're cutting out people, development people. Well, it's not the sport's job to sit here and wait for people to become good. It's our job to give opportunity to the ones that are going to move up the ladder. So that's my biggest thing. And then, of course, the biggest elephant in the room is the federation system, which is completely designed for corruption. The way it's one vote, one country, and everything is there for the top people to convince the bottom people to vote for them. And instead, we should create a system where the federations have to earn their right to get votes or to have power. And I would do that through a merit system based on championships, development, per capita performance, and also investment. These are things that small countries could end up earning more votes than big countries because they can do those things and be more focused on their own sport. So the biggest thing really is federation change, and we've got to shrink the top level of the sport.
It's interesting you said the idea of shrinking the top level of the sport with different tiers. Because I was thinking about this, right? Every year, USATF Foundation announces like who is getting funded, like for like, hey, we're giving these grants to these athletes, and the people who are getting the grants are not the people who really need the grants. It's like going to like the world champions, and they're like, it's kind of like if we have this pot of money, why are we giving it to the people who have, 6-figure contracts and not to the people who are like good but don't have 6-figure contracts? It's kind of weird how it's like, does a person who's making $1 million need a 60 grand grant? I think it's a waste of 60 grand. You know what I mean? So
Well, the thing about it is that the problem is that we have so few people that are really earning a good living in track and field. That many of them want that grant, but under the plan we're talking about, and you shrink it, then none of them would need it. They wouldn't need it because they'd be making two, three, four, 5 times more than what they make, and so now they're earning more, so they don't worry about the grant. And then you could take those grants and fund that second tier, which, let's say, the B League. You could fund them, give them a period of time. You can't say we're going to fund you for 10 years, but you give them a period of time to get either into that A League or back and forth, because the objective is to incentivize performance. Because in the G League and the NBA, you're playing to get in the A League. You get the NBA. You're every day you're trying to play better, to be seen, to go. Well, in track and field, there really is no thing. You just want to say, I want to be in the Olympics. If you're a person that qualifies for the Olympic trials and goes out in the first round, technically you have the exact same goal that the person that's in the Olympic, that goes to the Olympic Games or makes the team. So what if we change that? We funded this second tier group more and took the funding out of the first tier group. But our objective is to make it small enough where the same amount of money that's going into it now stays there. Now they earn a real living. It's a real professional sport. And then we have a developmental part of it at the bottom. They'll have meets where they'll still earn some money and things like that. It just won't be the same. I think that it'd be a much better system for us to go forward with.
When you kind of see multiple eras of track and field. You have the eras when you were a young buck, when you were in your prime, and then now as a coach, seeing a different generation, and also that middle part where you kind of weren't a coach or running, but you're just watching from the sideline. What do you think is the difference between the different eras of track and field that you have seen, I guess, compared to like during your prime, during like the Usain Bolt era, and then the current era?
Well, I made my first national team, U.S. national team in 1979. And we were still an under the table amateur sport. And so it was a different thing where it was kind of a hush hush, you're making money. But we were not considered professional. And then I realized at a young age that if you're going to be a professional sport, we have to change the rules, because at 17 and 18, I was like, I want to be a pro, I want to be a millionaire. That was my whole mantra. But then I realized, wait a minute, where you can't be a millionaire if no one makes $1 million. So my era was really about the seismic change of becoming professional. We fought for that. It wasn't just myself, Edwin Moses, Evan Ashford, a lot of the road runners were very instrumental in it. You look at someone like the New York Marathon, all these people were coming together, Fred LeBeau, all these people were coming together to make our sport professional. And I didn't name all of them, but there's so many people. And we were fighting for that all the way through the 80s. And by the time the 90s came, we were considered professional athletes. And then we were professional athletes. And we went through the 90s. Well, the difference I see in that era and this era is we were fighting for something. And I used to call our era the professional amateurs, because we were amateur athletes fighting for professionalism and acting like it. Now I think the issue now is that we're the amateur professionals, because they didn't take it to the next level. And so they're professional in the professional world, but they're really running their business like amateurs. And I don't mean like bad, but I mean in the mindset of what an amateur would do. They're not running it like a CEO, since that's what you are of your own career. And so that's been going on now for over 20 years. Once we started the Diamond League, which was previously the Golden League, the IAAF cannibalized most of the sponsors, pulled them into their house. And they have not shown that they're good stewards of sponsorship, because they haven't raised a lot of money. They haven't raised the value of the sport. We're not getting more. Just a perfect example is the World Championships in '97. They had a great deal. That was kind of like at the peak of where we were financially in terms of where the money was going. And the World Championships, they got a car, a Mercedes. They made $60,000 for a win. And people understood it. The stadiums were full. They were 40, 50, 60,000 seat stadiums. Well, here we are almost 30 years later, and the car's gone. The $60,000 is still there, but that $60,000 value is now 33,000. And you only need a stadium of 20,000 to be approved to have the Worlds. So it's pretty obvious to see that it's been on a steady decline. And nothing in the last 20 years has slowed that decline. I know that Sebastian Coe is very smart and has great ideas, but I think that the sport is stuck in a structure that's just impossible to succeed. So that's really the biggest different era. The era was exposed once he became professional in the 90s. It was all exposed, and you had to continue to fight the federation to kind of change. And they have not changed, but the sport has changed dramatically. When I was drafted by the Dallas Cowboys in 1984, that year I made more than all the NFL players, and through endorsements and appearance fees and everything else, I made more than all of it. So it was never an issue of going to play with Dallas. Nowadays, their money is gone incredibly, but ours has basically stayed the same for just a few. Um, I'd say 60% of the meets that were around in the 1990s are gone worldwide. It's not just America, gone worldwide. Many of the stadiums no longer have tracks in them anymore. The schedules have just gotten more and more crowded with federation type events with no coordination. So there really has it's just been floundering without any really new ideas for all these years. And so now we're kind of backs against the wall. And the system is not designed where the federation set up to change. So that's the problem. Now, Sebastian basically trying to change the sport with an iron and a big ball and chain on his ankle, trying to pull it. It's just not going to happen unless there's seismic change at the structure of what we do and how we run our sport.
Yeah, I always have fun, like kind of not fun, but talk about ways to improve the sport structurally. And like you said, you're talking about, hey, we need to shrink the number of considered pro athletes, which I think is a smart move because if everyone is a pro, then you kind of dilute the product and then you can't focus it on the right moments.
Right,
Um,
right. Well,
and
if everyone's a pro, no one's a pro.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
that's the problem we're in.
Yeah. Because every just becomes an open invitational. It's not an actual pro invitational. It's just an open meet. It's a local 5K, which are great, and local 5Ks can make money, but no one is watching a local 5K the same way they're watching an NBA basketball game. It's
Right,
different.
exactly.
So,
Or, or,
but
or March Madness like last night.
yeah, March Madness, man. Were you? One idea I had was that because we're an individual sport, that when I look at what's individual sports right now that aren't, the basketball, the individual sports that are successful, they don't have a global championship. They don't have 1 week a year that matters. They have 4 global championships every year in the major system, right? You have Wimbledon, French Open. So tennis has 4 majors, golf has 4 majors, and you get to see Tiger Woods and Serena Williams win 4 times a year, not just win once a year or for track and field once every 4 years, right? Because they only care about the Olympics or whatever. So I'm thinking that we should get rid of world championships and just have 4 majors, tie it to major marathons. So people are in town to watch it. You have the Berlin Marathon on Sunday. You have prelims on Thursday and Friday, and then finals on Thursday and Friday, and then finals on Saturday and Sunday, with the Sunday morning being the marathon. Perfect 4-day meet. That's how long a golf tournament. It's 4 days. Boom. Thank you very much. Do it in Boston or New York or Berlin or Tokyo. Do you think that's a good idea, or I'm anywhere with
No,
that
I
idea?
think it's a great idea because first of all, you establish weekends every year that people look forward to. Now, World Championships is every 2 years, and in reality, since it's bouncing around all the time, you're trying to find sponsorships for an event that's going to be inconsistent. So let's just say you said Berlin, of course, New York, London. I mean, these are places, Tokyo. I mean, these are places you could do that, and they're huge cities that could bring in a lot of money. I remember when the New York Marathon was small in the 70s and it was building. And look at it's huge now because it's been there, it's consistent. Everyone takes that weekend off and that's it. And then another thing too, if we shrink the top level of athletes and instead of having it, well, every country has a certain amount of people, we bring it down to the best people. Then there can be 4 days because you don't have so many athletes, you don't have so many rounds. And that's one of the things I think the NCAA does well is they send a small amount to nationals, and so they can have a tight meet. The indoor meet at 16 is really tough because, for instance, I think they could move that to 24 and add more to get more opportunity and access. But still, 24 you can run 3 heats like they do outdoors, and that's it. But look how tight the NCAA meet is, and you could do the same thing at Worlds. If you went to 32, then instead of 3 and 4 rounds, you could do 2 and 3 rounds. The distance races could be 2 rounds. Um, in some cases, they would only be one. The 10,000 could only be one race, like it is, or maybe the 5,000. And then these cities can get ready for it. You look at a New York Marathon, and the New York Marathon, if it added instead of the New York Marathon, it's a New York Athletics weekend. Look what would be if you had the track meet all weekend and then the marathon on the weekend. You have 50,000 runners, but you'd have a huge weekend. And I think it's a tremendous idea. And then on the outside of that, you still can have your regional, like your European championships and Asian, African, uh, Pan Am games. You can still have those, but put those at the same time so that you're leaving the schedule at the same time instead of crisscrossing that and consolidating the entire global schedule so that everyone's in the same place at the same time, just like they do in a lot of cases in other sports. I know tennis and golf have different golf tournaments on weekends. Well, that's fine. But when you have your majors, everyone clears out for those majors. And that's something the track and field could and should do.
Yeah, because even as someone who doesn't even follow golf or tennis, when I see a major on, I'm gonna watch it because I'm like, oh, okay, this isn't important. I want to see who wins, but and I get that 4 times a year, so I get that 4 times, 16 times every 4 years, whereas track athletes get that 3 times every 4 years because they don't. There's an off year, and then the Olympics, right? So
Right.
16 champions in 4 years versus 3 champions in 4 years. It's easy. It's better to have 16. So
Yeah, but you have to also look at the context in this. Okay, and this is just a reality. So when Fred LeBeau and got the New York Marathon or Chicago, when those marathons put together, they're put together by business, or rock and roll marathons. They're put together as a business, and they've grown tremendously. U.S. championships, and they're put together by federations, and they're declining. So it's not rocket science that if you take it and you consolidated them to the idea that you have those marathons, and they're for-profit businesses, those events, instead of run by federations and people, then you'd see that. And then you really don't have to have the national championships because you don't have a world championships. These events serve as those championships, just like the U.S. Open for
yeah,
years was the U.S. championships. Well, the ones in the United States kind of evolve into that. So we get away from a national champion every year to a champion of that. They don't really have a national championship for tennis or golf. They usually have their events which are like that. But the reality is that we need to find ways to be innovative, bring the running community into track and field stadiums, and get track and field to respect the running community more, the general running community more, and make sure that we look at our sport as a whole, as a business, in order to grow. Because right now it's declining so fast that I just don't see where the kids I'm even recruiting are going to have a sport to go to earn a living.